And so the vice presidential debate, it happened a week from today, a week ago to it almost may sound like it happened in the future, but a week ago today it happened. And I mentioned, as I said on the show, I was going to talk about it. And at first I thought it was because I thought it was going to be pretty interesting. Although watching it, and one of the main things I noticed is it really wasn't all that interesting, or at least in terms of compared to the presidential debate, since there were a lot more, quotable lines and all that from that. But I guess there aren't really a lot of vice presidential debates that are all that interesting or changing the game or anything like that when you think about it. And it was, in the news. I mean, at this point, it's kind of in the feels really distant. I don't know, but at least to me personally, it feels pretty distant. The presidential debate at this point was still like fresh news. I felt like, but right now, the vice president debate feels like it was a while ago, which it kind of was, I guess. But like I said, it is news, and this is the only chance I'm going to get to talk about a lot of election stuff for a while, or at least for the rest of the time I'm in college, or the only time when I'm in college for the entirety of my time here. So I figured I would discuss it. So before getting into it, I assume a lot of people listening watched it, if there are a lot of people listening. And from the polls I saw, it seemed most people saw it was either like it was mostly like a tie, basically, or at least the general outcome was kind of a tie because the vast majority of the polls I saw showed JD Vance had like a 1% lead or something in the polls for who won, or it was tied, one of those two. There weren't a lot with Walz as the winner. And I think part of that is, to be fair, JD Vance kind of had pretty, in fact, not pretty, but like ridiculously low expectations set for himself. That as long as he like succeeded in getting his points across and all that, then it was a victory, which, he did. So I give him his due credit because a lot of people have made fun of him and all that. He did. I feel like he did better than most people expected he would. And I read an article beforehand that from CNN actually that Walz was pretty nervous going into the debate. So if anything, I predicted that actually JD Vance would win by a lot more. To be honest, I actually thought it would be like he would get something like a 10% like lead in terms of who won. I mean, not that it was going to affect the race that much, but that a lot of people would see him as the winner there. Similar to when, if people remember, in 2008, Sarah Palin actually did a lot better than the expectation because he's the vice presidential pick I've seen compared the most of Sarah Palin probably in history. Maybe like Dan Quayle or something like that is kind of similar, but she actually, most people thought, I don't know if I'd say won that debate, but did a lot better than expected. It was about 50-50 maybe, and she only had like one or two mistakes made in the debate. So because of that, if anything, kind of thought JD Vance would maybe have a better turnout. I mean, in terms of what percentage of people thought he won. And it was still, I mean, again, at least tying is still good, but it seemed like most people thought he won that one. And Vance also probably, it seems like optically, I understand part of why people thought he won was because he did seem like a lot younger, a lot more of like a young guy, I guess, because he only like, 40 or something like that. Walz looked a lot older, and he looked kind of sad a lot, I noticed. Although I'm not going to call him old, though, because, I mean, I kind of feel like after the presidential debate in June with Joe Biden, a lot of people are kind of hesitant to say any politician looks old right now. So I won't say he looked that old, because he's not even that old. He's like 60. So he's not really that old. But he did look sad a lot during the debate, which I noticed, which I think maybe can be attributed to either he was worried or about doing poorly during most of the debate, or he was just sad during the debate. But he seemed to resemble, there was a joke of, well, I shouldn't say there was a joke or anything, because I think I was the first person to see comment on this. But he looked kind of like, what's his face, Waldorf from the Muppets, without the mustache though, since he was one of the two Muppets who, like, the old guys heckling in the balcony, which was kind of funny to make that comparison. But it was a pretty civil debate, was another thing I saw. There weren't very many like gotcha moments. I think most of the questions were, fair. In fact, I think pretty much all the questions were fair, and there was very little of the two candidates trying to like one up each other. There was that one moment where I think JD Vance said something like, don't fact check me, or like, no, you guys said there were going to be no fact checking or something like that. But that was really the only dig at the moderators or whatever. Because usually I've seen after every debate, there seems to be some sort of dig at the moderators. Because in 2020, 2024, back in June, there was a lot of people who were more on the left upset with the moderators in the debate with Trump and Biden for not fact checking Trump. And then in the more recent debate with Kamala Harris, there was a lot of complaints from the right about the fact checking being unfair or whatever. So this was the first one, even though there were no fact checking. It seems like there was a lot less, crap thrown at the moderators. So that's cool. I don't really know if it's much that's going to hold the idea of these debates being a bit more civil, especially because I feel like these guys probably feel a lot less of the pressure because they're the vice presidential candidate, and whoever wins or loses, I feel like there's going to be not much thrown at the vice presidential candidates, and also because vice president, when you really look at it, is probably not that desirable of a job when you think about it, just because the only official duties of the vice president are, I think it's something like swearing in new members of Congress, voting when there's a tie, and then if the president tells them to do anything like scrub the toilet or whatever, they have to go do that. And so because of that, I think the vice president is also seen as a desirable job because you set yourself up as a great chance of winning the presidential nomination next time. So maybe that's partially why there was a lot less anger and there's a lot less pressure on their side. At least I would assume. Although I will say, because of Vance narrowly like winning the debate, as some people saw it, I feel like Walz may have benefited more just because the only line I've really seen referenced in the debate was from Walz, which was near the end when Vance was asked about something like if Trump lost in 2020. I think that was around when he mentioned the fact checking or something like that. And he was asked if Trump lost in 2020, and he basically kind of didn't answer. And then when asked to answer just yes or no on the question if Trump lost, he said, quote, "I'm focused on the future." So Walz responded by saying something along the lines of like, it's a damning non-answer or something, which is true because honestly, I mean, it's kind of funny that, I mean, the fact is it's been like something like but it's not something like it's been 4 years since the last election, and it's still not kind of accepted that Trump had lost, which is a bit surprising. But yeah, I mean, it is true. It is in the past. I mean, it is a past issue. But again, it's something that happened in the past that we kind of want to move on from, and not kind of just accepting what happened in the election is not moving on from it. And also, I think it's kind of fun. It's kind of a dodge because, inflation, immigration, all that stuff, or the perceived like the things they're criticizing Biden and like Kamala Harris for the past 4 years. I mean, that's technically in the past too, if you want to talk about it. But that's always brought up as stuff against Kamala Harris. Although that makes sense because she is like the vice president. So if they want to attack her on things, they're obviously going to attack her on things in this administration. But yeah, so that's in the past. The election was in the past. It's all in the past. So we can only judge about what happened in the past. So we got to kind of be consistent with that, And even though, I mean, kind of moving on, Vance won the debate in terms of who the general public seemed to think won. I did notice there was some mixed things on the other side where Tim Walz's favorability actually increased more than Vance's, since his jumped something like 18% to Vance's 17%, according to NBC News, which isn't a huge jump. But it also makes Tim Walz's total approval rating something like plus 31%, at least in that one poll. And Vance's that wasn't enough to bring him to a positive approval rating. So that was more of a win for Tim Walz. I don't really know why they do. It seems like when they do these post-debate surveys with voters, they ask a lot of questions. And I think sometimes, you might as well just ask who won the debate and then, who do you think won on this issue and this issue? Because all the other stuff, like who could you see as being president more? Who do you personally like more? I mean, that seems to just kind of be rewordings of the same question, at least in my opinion. So it was kind of a mixed night then for that. So ultimately, the vice presidential debates rarely impact the election. I mean, the last one that I think even had any like memorable lines really, or that impacted it all that much maybe, was like that whole 1988 one with the Jack Kennedy towards Dan Quayle. I mean, that's the only one people I think have a lot of memory of besides recent ones, just because they're the most recent. So it doesn't really have that much of an effect on the election. And from like, I don't check the presidential polling all that much really, or like what the polls say. When I do, it seems that the polls are basically the same as before the election without much change. I mean, it's possible, again, since Vance technically, in a lot of people's eyes, he won the debate, maybe it would have helped Trump slightly, but I couldn't say for sure. But if anything, I think Walz may have been the real benefactor of the debate for various reasons, as I had mentioned. But I don't know. I really don't think, especially because there hasn't been any major change, we can say for sure. But I guess if the election's really close, like within 1% or something, maybe we can say that this one debate pushed it over the edge for either candidate. But I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. I don't know. We have a little less than a month before the election, so I'll be back here by then, and I guess I'll be able to be the judge if that happened or not.